Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. We are going to be discussing everything going on in Germany and Europe as it relates to, this massive crackdown on democratic freedoms by the globalist establishment, and also what those individuals are trying to do in further provoking Russia rather than settle a peace that can be agreeable to all parties. Joining me today is a very special guest, Dr. Rainer Rothfuss. He is a geographer, a former junior professor, and most importantly, a politician with the AfD party holding a doctorate in political geography. He's been serving now for a couple of years, and he is leading the good fight in Germany, a fight that they're trying to crack down on now. So, Dr. Rothfuss, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be on your show. Thank you so much.
What do you make about this? And maybe you could enlighten some of our viewers if they haven't heard about it, but this state crackdown in Germany on AfD, labeling the party as extremists, and then surveilling the party, now saying that they're not so sure about that labeling. There's some court cases pending. What is going on here?
Well, to summarize it in a few words, it's all about German sovereignty. That's the background of all. And German sovereignty shall be regained by Alternative for Germany, offering the citizens policies where the citizens matter and not the interests either of Washington or of the globalists once they have lost control of Washington, as is the case at the moment. Now the globalists are exerting their control, their pressure over Brussels. But what is and what remains true is that Germany shall always serve the globalist interests. And we are against it. That's the whole story.
Mm-hmm. Are there any active measures that are being taken right now in the Bundestag to try and counter this madness, or is it simply up to the hands of the courts like we saw in Romania not too long ago?
Well, in German Bundestag, it cannot really be decided. Of course, there was a motion already in the plenary that urged for a ban of Alternative for Germany from the political arena. But we counter those offenses just with good and reasonable work, with the right arguments. We have never really changed our course, our program. We are completely transparent in anything we do. So they can also spy on us with their interior secret service. It's not a problem for us. Once they have to release the reports on which they base these accusations, they make themselves ridiculous. And so a commentator just uttered that this report, the 1,100 pages, this secured radical right-wing extremism is based on, is rather a case for psychiatry than for the Federal Office of Protection of the Constitution. And this guy is not just somebody, he is a former social democratic minister of finances and of research of a federal state of Germany. And he has written a book about this problem of the Federal Office of for the Protection of the Constitution. And he has found it very strange that in a democracy, the opposition is being fought by an office which is steered by the government itself. So this resembles rather an autocracy than a democracy, and it's unique for Germany in the whole Western Hemisphere.
Do you think this is prompted mainly by the rise in success of AfD in the most recent elections? And what in particular right now, 2025, is the biggest threat to the establishment that AfD poses?
Well, the establishment has declared the United States under President Donald Trump as an enemy. They don't call it like that, but they act and behave like that. They try to lecture the Trump government on democracy and on German history. And we, as Alternative for Germany, we are really very, very grateful for the corrections being lectured upon our political establishment by the American government. Because it helps us a lot. We would really be at risk without that support. And I would guess that about 10% of our voter support stems from that support from the United States because, they also uphold the enemy image of Trump being a destroyer of democracy, but a certain part of the population doesn't believe it and just sees he's a great businessman and really acting very effectively in government. And so they think twice when they hear that important figures of the US government support the Alternative for Germany. But should it ever come to a party ban, then we know, and the establishment in Germany, the political establishment in Germany knows, and they would counter fierce opposition on behalf of the United States. What would happen if Trump just imposed 50% extra taxes on imports from Germany, or right away for EU imports? They would be crushed immediately. So yeah, that gives us really freedom to act, to keep on track. And that is what they fear most, that we become more and more popular, that the voters change sides step by step, because they see that even voting another government in, Friedrich Merz instead of Olaf Scholz, the combination of Merz and Scholz, by the way, is Schmerz. And in German, that means, in English, translated to English, it means pain. So that's what people feel. They have voted for another government, but what remains is just pain, because it's so painful to see that they are all stuck in the same dead end road. They cannot change really the policies of the of Germany because we still uphold those holy values and doctrines of climate change, Russia is evil, and migration is good and helps the world, and most of all, German economy. And so as long as you stick to this doctrine, this wokeness doctrine, what can you change? What can you improve? Because those policies cost the taxpayer a whole lot of money, and not only the taxpayer, but also the big capital owners. And they are mobile. The citizens are not that much. I mean, 250,000 Germans, well-educated, qualified Germans, leave Germany every year net. But the companies, the capital owners, they are even more mobile. So as soon as they start moving, for example, towards the United States, then Germany is at risk. And with Germany as the main financing actor of the European Union is at risk.
At what point, though? I mean, you've got most of my friends, no one wants to travel to Germany, France, for example. They don't want to travel to these countries that have been invaded by these massive waves of migrants. The German population is suffering under 3 consecutive years of economic stagnation. At what point do they look at the current government and say, what are we doing here? I mean, you just said it. They voted for the opposite side of the same coin in this most recent elections. Why still does that take place? Why can't they find their Trump?
Because the media is even more controlled in Germany than in the United States. Alternative media, just like yours, are also gaining momentum in Germany, but we're still lagging behind the development in the United States. And you have quite reasonable programs like Fox News, for example. which is a lot better, far better than the regular German TV programs. So this holds the people in the same cage of thinking. They can only believe and imagine what they hear day by day. And so they believe that Alternative for Germany is right-wing extremist, following National Socialist doctrine. I mean, we are totally opposing those ideas. We are rather liberal, conservative, I would say, and not liberal in the American sense, but we believe in freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of press, etc. And they are held captive in the cage of global warming beliefs, that Russia is evil, etc. And that is the main problem. Media form the convictions of people, and the convictions, of course, lead to certain outcomes in elections. We don't have that much problems of voter fraud in Germany, but rather of manipulation of minds. So we have to overcome this problem. But just to finalize on that, the fact that within 3 years, we have doubled our outcomes in the most recent federal elections shows that yet the Germans are breaking free from that cage.
Do you think it's possible that with this rise in popularity, do you think it's possible that the states could hypothetically outlaw AfD? I mean, is that even a possibility? You get into these weird territories where they're going to start labeling people as extremists, surveilling them. I presume banning parties would come next.
Yeah, of course, we take that threat very serious. And I think we have to look also at the framework conditions. I mean, the judicial system still works in Germany, and it's very hard to ban a party. So you cannot just take some quotations from speeches, YouTube videos, or whatsoever to prove that a party really tries to abolish the free democratic system in Germany. And of course, we prove in all our speeches and in our program that we want to introduce even direct democratic forms of democracy, so referenda, for example. And so in a court case, it will be really hard to decide, yes, we have to ban this party. But should the framework conditions change in a way that Germany is being dragged into a war with Russia, let's say, then of course you could invoke emergency laws and ban a party right away, because you could just label them as being complicit with Russia, as the enemy, and then you constitute a threat to the system. I mean, just look at Ukraine. All the opposition parties have been banned, and the left-wing parties were the target just right from the beginning. Media outlets have been banned. This has already happened in the EU. You cannot receive RT and Sputnik. It's banned from the EU against the German constitution, because that says that the citizen has the right of free access to information. So that's the question. How far are we away from the casus bellum, where we are in war? We have heard signals now from the ambassador of Ukraine in Berlin saying that they are very, very content with the weapon systems being delivered now to Ukraine. And they have always asked for Taurus, and Merz has also promised the delivery of this long-range or rather long-range cruise missile. So what is going on there? We don't know. We are not being informed as politicians, and much less the public. That is the risk. Should they drag us into war, we would be lost as an opposition party. That's what I fear.
And as a country, how do you think Germany would fare? I hope, by the grace of God, Donald Trump either chooses to wipe his hands clean of the Ukraine issue and say this is not my war, or he achieves a peace. But there's the possibility that he joins in the escalation. But if he does what he's been saying, if he says this is not my war, I don't want to be a part of it, and Europe, led by Germany and France, decide to escalate and continue supporting Ukraine against Russia, how do you think Germany would fare?
Well, I mean, Germany would be lost because we were already hit the strongest through the sanctions policies imposed by Joe Biden and taken over by the European Union, because it's not Germany which can decide uh, in a sovereign way about this sanctions, but it's the EU. It's EU only policy field concerning tariffs and sanctions. And yeah, it would hit us extremely. I mean, the sanctions, the ban of Russian natural gas and oil has hit us already. And we would be, of course, a major target in such a war. So I ask myself always, how can they even think of going to war, taking Ukraine as the pretext? But if you look at the overall economic situation, I mean, you said before that we have been in a stagnation for about 3 years, but to be honest, this is recession because we have also inflation, and the figures are rather below zero than zero. And that also gives us hints that maybe the financial system, the situation, the stability of the euro is at severe risk. And of course, they will not tell us a long time before, but they will just try to overwhelm us with the developments. And once maybe the financial crisis is there, they need someone to blame it on. And of course, it would be most convenient to blame it on Russia, to blame it on Putin. If you listen to the speeches in the plenary sessions here in German parliament, it's always Russia, it's always Putin's fault because our situation is deteriorating. And that's what I fear. Maybe they need a conflict to hide their own errors of the past.
If a peace is settled with Ukraine, I mean, you've got Zelensky in Istanbul this week with the Russian delegation right now. Do you think that the current leadership under Merz would be open to the idea of ever reestablishing the flow of gas through a reconstructed and rebuilt Nord Stream pipeline infrastructure?
I see that chance only under the pressure of the US government. Should President Trump, should American investors buy Nord Stream, we have had those signals already, then they could, of course, make pressure to open the pipeline, to repair the 3 pipes that have been damaged through the blasts. And then the pressure would be extreme, of course, to open also the German market, the European market again for natural gas. But the Merz government itself has determined to stay an enemy of Russia. That is at least what the new foreign minister, Johann Wadephul, has uttered in a prankster interview made by Russian pranksters who made him believe that he was talking to the head of the office of Zelensky. And that he uttered such things that even if the war in Ukraine ended, Russia would always remain the enemy of Germany. And this is, of course, terrible. And I see that all the political decisions being made at the moment just have this objective in mind: to deepen the trench between Germany and Russia, and to prevent the relationships from normalizing. And this is, of course, in the interest of the globalist leadership, because they fear any leadership resorting to national development models, be it Donald Trump, be it Vladimir Putin, be it Viktor Orban, be it the Alternative for Germany here in Berlin.
Alice Weidel, she gave an interview, I believe it was this week. She said that there needs to be the cleaning out of corrupt elements from the German government. How is there any way to even go about this without being in power? How can these individuals be held accountable for plunging Germany into this catastrophic spiral?
Yeah, I would say in this sense, democracy works, because only 12 years ago, we were not even there. And those forces could abuse parties as they wanted, as they needed, for their own purpose. But Alternative for Germany now just uses the democratic system in a totally legitimate way to expose such fraud, such corruption, such dedication just to the interests of great capital owners, the globalist leadership, instead of really taking into account the interests of the normal citizens. And that helps a great deal. Of course, we are kept away from the most sensitive information. For example, we have never been allowed to join the committee in Parliament surveying the intelligence services, because there they also discuss the attacks on the most prominent opposition party, the Alternative for Germany. But in the end, they can keep us away from funding, like they do with the political foundations. In Germany, we have a system where every party has its own political foundation, and they are being granted almost 700 million euros per year to finance those political foundations. And they maintain offices in almost all the countries of the world and exert political influence there, do networking, etc. They train journalists, etc. And we get really zero euros for our political foundation. And yet it doesn't help them, because people just tend to understand more and more that they are being just fooled by those parties, by their narratives, by the media. And so it's an ongoing process of liberation of people's minds and convictions. And when they labeled us right-wing extremist, in only 3 days, about 1,000 people wanted to join Alternative for Germany. So they showed, no, we stand with you. And we are a small party in terms of numbers. We only have around about 55,000 party members, because they try to shy people away, because we are supposed to be right-wing extremists. But people tend to now react in the opposite way and give us more and more support.
I was going to ask that. I was going to say, what was the public response to the attacks, the labeling of extremism? 1,000 new members is a good sign, especially if that's a peak, I'm assuming, a jump in membership signups. How did the broader public respond outside of those 54 to 55,000 people? Is there a lot of outrage over alleged possible, interference in the politics of AfD, or are people simply just not buying this anymore? Kind of what happened to Trump.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there are still many people who buy this narrative, but also you can see some changes. If you look at the situation in early 2024, when they launched an initiative against us, calling us racist because we wanted to follow the concept of remigration to counter the illegal immigration that has been going on for years and years, in the millions, about 10 million immigrants in the past 10 years. Really, round about 2.5 to 3 million people took to the streets. There were large demonstrations, which were also headed by politicians of the mainstream parties. And now this labeling of being right-wing extremist didn't lead to any larger demonstrations. They tried to restart those demonstrations, but they were really disappointed that not too many people joined them. And that shows me something is changing at the moment in Germany. And this is a promising development, I would say. And I think it's also possibly a global development, because you have gone through the same thing in the United States. You can see this development in all the Western wokist mainstream controlled countries. They are more and more escaping these doctrines.
I have one last question for you, and it's something that I think is unique to the West, because in Eastern countries, you don't see this problem. You see many left-wing, traditional value left-wing parties who are anti-globalist succeed. And of course, in the global South, you see these parties succeed overwhelmingly. But in the West, in Europe and in the United States, and of course in the United Kingdom, a lot of these anti-globalist leftists, true leftists, have seemingly sold out their opinions, sold out to woke culturalism, and kind of abandoned the traditional economic populism that guided their rise to success. I'm curious if you could speak to BSW, and I'm sure I'm going to pronounce her last name wrong, but Sarah Wagenknecht, and what has kind of caused her poor performance in the most recent elections? I watched her debate with Alice Weidel. Frankly, I wasn't that impressed. I was more impressed by Weidel. Why do you think people are, failing to resonate with her in the same way that they failed to resonate with Mélenchon and Bernie Sanders and these sorts of figures?
Mm-hmm. I would say, and many commentators have made the same observation, that BSW was too quick to join governments in 3 different Eastern German federal states last year. So hastily, they gave up their positions to form governments with CDU, with SPD. And that gave the voter basis the impression, they side too easily with the establishment, with the system. They give up their positions. And what people at the moment are looking for is real opposition, real change. So either people stick with their own party preferences, or they want real change. And also the resurgence of the left, the real left of Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, shows that their extremism, which was expressed on TikTok and in speeches in parliament, attracted many more voters than the attempt of Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, of BSW, to align with the establishment and its narratives. They, for example, shied away from a meeting of BRICS Europe countries in Sochi. I went there, and we were 3 parliamentarians of Alternative for Germany. So they didn't want to have negative headlines in the newspapers. And we were more bold in our statements. So we produced the negative headlines, and therefore we're also seen as the beacon of hope, as the lighthouse in the darkness, where you saw, there is orientation, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so I would also, I don't fear the competition of BSW. I think they should succeed in the future, because in geopolitical positioning, you could always see in parliamentary discussions that we were very close to them.
Mm-hmm.
On social policies, okay, on economic policies, on tax policies, we have differences. We believe in the slim state. They want more state control. But in geopolitical terms, we were quite close. And this is the most important thing. Where do you position yourself, your country in this changing world? Do you believe in multipolarity, or do you think that the globalist unipolar leadership can be taken over by Brussels now, as Washington has failed with Kamala Harris? So this is the main question that you have to answer, and BSW has found the same answers as we did. So in principle, it would give us the opportunity to approach the same problem from different sides and offer the public solutions that are at least to some extent compatible. But the Christian Democratic Union, which is also conservative, and you would believe they are closer to Alternative for Germany, they believe so strongly in the EU super state they want to create. This is really a dangerous development, because I see tyranny looming in the EU and not freedom. It's not a democratic system. If you centralize this anti-democratic, undemocratic system of the EU, then you give up the control possibility of the citizen.
I fully agree. And that's why I support you guys and all the populists in Germany that are working to undo the madness. So, Dr. Rothfuss, thank you so much for joining me here today. And I salute your work going forward. Where should people follow along with you on social media to stay up to date with your work and what AfD is up to?
Well, you can find me under Rainer Rothfuss on YouTube, on Telegram, of course. You can find our party speeches in Parliament on YouTube. We rely heavily on social media because we are being banned and distorted from other media. Yeah, but we hope also that we can join forces with other populist movements, as you said, because I think it's a positive label to be populist. We don't do our work for any hidden forces. We do it because we are convinced that the people's will shall count. The lives of people shall be protected when we speak about wars, be it in Ukraine, be it in the Middle East. We have to serve with common sense the common people, and that unites us. And don't believe in that bullshit of left, right, everything. In terms of our positioning towards the Ukraine war, we are rather left-wing extremists because we totally oppose the weapon delivery. We say diplomacy comes first, and only then, if the last resort will not help, weapons may speak, but we have to avoid it. And this is a traditional leftist position. So forget about that. We need to join forces. We need to make clear that democracy can work again, produce results for the people, because that is what democracy means. It means that people reign and not the capital, not the globalists. And this should be our international goal altogether. And thank you for your work, Jackson. And it was great to talk to you.
Thank you.